right. Well, happy Friday, and thank you all for being here. I know it's the end of the day, and it's been a great week. So just real quick, I want to thank all the organizers. So Harry, his brother Jolly, Luke, Charlotte doing the production, everybody else. I got to know these guys a couple years ago. Last year, they did a great event. I have been fortunate enough to sort of come along for this ride as, I guess, really over the last year or so, they've been doing a great job impacting our ecosystem in a very positive way. So congratulations to you all, spectacular event, and well done. Okay, so today, I guess there's a couple of things we'll kind of delve into that maybe, in my opinion, have not been surfaced sufficiently enough relative to the threat that they pose, that this particular topic poses. But not only that, the opportunity as well. And so I guess just a little bit about me. I'm kind of like, I was like one of the consensus bros from the beginning. I spent 6 years there. I was with Polygon for a couple of years, and I run a fund. And I guess a lot of people probably in this room, I know many of you, and I've just been around observing. I'm not a quantum physicist. I can barely do math, but my autism kicked in 3 months ago or so, and I've basically done a lot of research and gone very deep into this space. I've also spent quite a bit of time with a couple guys, one guy named Stefano, another guy named Fabrizio. They are physicists at Oxford, and they've been very gracious in helping me understand many of these concepts. And I'd like to talk about some of this stuff a bit with you guys today. So I guess the first, it's a pretty standard slide, but you know, the first thing I want to highlight is that actually, even though maybe there might be something in the back of your mind that, I don't know, perhaps you've heard of quantum computing, or it's just been kind of like this weird afterthought maybe, that somehow, whether it's D-Wave or Google, they're going to build this big, giant, massive machine, and it's going to require, you know, all the money in the world and probably another 20 years and a set of converging technologies. But what I want to highlight is that actually the reality is there's a burgeoning and booming startup ecosystem that has already taken in, I guess, tens of billions of dollars, which has been working in a multi-pronged fashion, tackling a multitude of problems that somehow coalesce and start to form a picture, whether that's on the hardware side, theoretical physics side, on the research side, or on the algorithmic side. There's a multitude of great startups doing a ton of stuff, and this is just like one tiny little snapshot. Okay, so I don't know how well you can see the bottom. Hopefully it's clear. But in any case, yeah. So the main takeaway is that this stuff, in my opinion, is coming much, much sooner than we realize. And Riverlane, as an example, great company, they do lots of really great research, kind of highlighted some points here. I guess some of this stuff got cut off, but hopefully the slide deck will be available online. In terms of the rate of growth, okay, in progress, with respect to a multitude of like key problems that need to be solved, we are definitely in the exponential growth phase right now. And I'll talk a little bit about, oh, there it is. Okay, great. So, you know, things like streaming high fidelity memory and quantum gates and logic at scale and universal gate sets. These are terms that may be brand new, but I suspect that in the coming months and years, these will be just as common as smart contracts and hardware wallets and terms that may have been completely foreign to us, you know, 10, 12 years ago. But all that to say, this stuff is progressing very, very quickly. So there, and I guess Vitalik did a talk at ETHCC this past July in Brussels, and there was a slide in terms of like where, maybe it was like a prediction market bet or something, where the consensus on when quantum computing and quantum risk would enter into the fray, when that would sort of appear. And you know, you got this kind of like intersection somewhere around 2038, and you know, it corresponds to the number of qubits. And I guess probably the original thinking was, well, if you had to build a big giant machine that could somehow stabilize, you know, millions of qubits, that's going to take a while and it's going to be very hard. But actually, one of the things that's happened, aside from hardware development and physics, R&D research, is that algorithms have improved tremendously over the last few years. Okay, this is kind of like, if I had to guess, the gap that we have already filled or are very close to filling in terms of algorithmic performance improvement and kind of getting us closer to that X marks the spot on the timeline. And this is kind of like one of the charts from IBM. Okay, so let's kind of like explain in simple terms. And I guess the message really that I've been trying to convey and others have been trying to convey is that, again, instead of one giant massive machine, okay, that's very, very hard to build, and maybe if you've ever Googled quantum computers, you'll see that Google machine that looks incredible and it's very huge and it's got these like, high precision parts. It may not be the case that that's exactly what we need to build, but rather through a confluence of algorithmic improvements and much smaller devices networked together, which I'll get into in a second, you might actually sort of not need this big, gigantic machine that seems to be very hard to build. Okay, so it's a guy named Litinsky, and he wrote a paper in 2022. You should check it out. And basically, he, in a very elegant, articulate, scientific way, elucidates what I'm trying to explain in very simple terms, which is that instead of one giant, massive machine, you can actually network together a bunch of really small machines and do things like break Bitcoin every 10 minutes. And those are just some kind of statistics. There's also some other really cool stuff that I think hopefully you can take away from this presentation and do your own research, because it's going to take time. But things like trapped ion implementations, photonic implementations, like there's a multitude of different approaches that are being taken as far as how to essentially stabilize qubits so that you can do this type of very unique computation. Okay, and maybe I should back it up and just, I probably should have started with this, but really, if any of you have gone on YouTube and searched physics videos, I love watching Roger Penrose talk and some of these other great folks. You've got sort of, you've got relativity and you've got the physics of like describing celestial bodies and how things work on a large scale, and then you've got quantum physics, which describes how things operate at a very small scale. And at that scale, there's a lot of really weird behavior, things like superposition, entanglement, and so leveraging the characteristics inherent to that level of our universe into computing gives us potentially the possibility to do incredible amounts of what would otherwise be very hard computation. The reason that's relevant for this particular talk is because if you wanted to take a public key and from that public key derive a private key, it would take you a very, 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 very long time given the current set of classical computing options and algorithms available to you. But if this stuff that I'm talking about here comes to fruition, it may take a very short amount of time. And so, that would be very problematic. And so, it's not necessarily that the consensus layer is going to be broken, because that sort of deals with hashing, but it's really the accounts. If you've got a public key that's exposed, from that you can derive the private key. If you have the capability to do the type of computation in a sufficient amount of it within a certain time period, i.e. instead of like 1 trillion years, you can do it in 10 minutes, then basically our entire ecosystem is at risk. Okay, so one of the things in the Litinsky paper is this point here, how to compute a 256-bit elliptic curve private key with only 50 million Toffoli gates. And while that might sound like a handful, or a mouthful rather, it basically refers to essentially some components that go into a lot of this quantum computing infrastructure being highly optimized to the point where with a smaller than what would otherwise have probably been projected number of this stuff, you could potentially break 256-bit elliptic curve cryptography, which is like the basis for public-private key pair infrastructure. It's the reason why you can go to bed at night and sleep comfortably so long as you securely store your private keys that, tomorrow you're going to wake up and your keys will still be there and your tokens will still be in your account. If this 256-bit elliptic curve system is broken, then you might not sleep so well at night. Okay, so this is a little bit more kind of diving into the part that I was saying earlier as far as rather than what I guess we have generally imagined over the last 15 or 20 years as quantum computing has somewhat begun to capture our imagination, is that we would need these like incredibly powerful, very large, hard to build computers that are from the future and built by aliens or something, and that you would need some type of effort between like Google and the NSA, and only they could build it using like a DARPA project or something, versus actually what's happening is, in addition to the algorithmic improvements, startup companies like PsiQuantum, and I'll talk about them in a little bit here, are building much smaller devices. So in the case of PsiQuantum, they have these 1,152 qubit devices. And if you put together 6,000 of them, you get a sufficient number of qubits and trapped ions that basically, in a very short period of time, you can crack somebody's private keys. And not to freak anyone out, but recently there's been some very old Bitcoin that's been moving. And then the other thing, I just got this news, actually, you can check it out, the South China Morning Post. Just news from today. It says, Chinese scientists hack military-grade encryption on quantum computer. So if you just look online for South China Morning Post and quantum computer, I'm sure it'll pop up. So, I just think, and really thinking through it, like, I don't believe that quantum risk presents an existential risk today, but I do believe the timeline is much shorter. However, when it does come, if we're unprepared, then essentially what's going to happen is you're just going to see threads on Twitter about old Bitcoin moving. And maybe you might not think anything of it. Or, people post and they say, wow, this guy was amazing. He held for 15 years and now he's got $30 million or whatever. But that's what it would look like at first. It would be very hard to decipher from anything else. Okay, so we have more good news. I just realized I probably look like the VC meme guy right now, actually. It's my outfit and my coffee. So quantum computers have entered into mass production. If you do a bit of research, and you can click on some of those links and you can take a look online, you'll find that, for example, Governor Pritzker is the governor of Illinois, and Mayor, I think his name's Brandon Adams, Mayor of Chicago. If you go on both of their X accounts, you will see fairly recently they were like shilling in a big way PsiQuantum opening a massive facility in Illinois for the purpose of manufacturing these things. Likewise, if you go to the Prime Minister of Australia, and I forget which respective other, government officials in that region, in Brisbane, they were doing the same thing because PsiQuantum has a facility down there for some time now. There are facilities popping up all over the place. Of course, Palo Alto for a long time already. And these facilities, and by the way, you can do a little hack. One of the things I like to do is look at job boards, and we were able to find a bunch of people that would have the skill sets and qualifications as, let's say, quality engineers and production engineers and things like that, precisely for scaling up a production facility like this for a high-tech industrial manufacturing product and process. You'll even find those in the UK, and there's several production facilities in the UK. In addition to that, you'll find the regulatory landscape. Lots of people have been talking about regulation, I'm sure, at various talks throughout this. It's a big thing in crypto now. Most of the Western democracies, and I believe China as well, have already passed laws that if you have a device with 50 qubits or more, you cannot export it. And if you do, it's kind of like treason. So these are very serious laws. And I would just say, like, all of these little tidbits of information form a picture, and I think kind of sharpens our view about what's really going on. Okay, so what does broken mean for Q-Day? Basically, it means that, tokens that you think belong to you, and, that we all have confidence will belong to us the next day, so long as we safely secure our private keys, may not be the case. I think that you'll see a lot of really interesting attacks, And by the way, this stuff, it depends on each blockchain as well, because there's different characteristics, design decisions, architectures, et cetera. For example, in the case of Solana, one of the reasons Solana has the performance characteristics that it has, enabling it to be fast, cheap, and user-friendly, is because the block sizes are very small, 1 kilobyte, which means that you'll never be able to fit a big signature into that. So something like a Lamport signature, which is another term that I think is going to become just as common as Solidity or a smart contract or something. Essentially, the way you protect your accounts, the way you protect your tokens is moving them into wallet infrastructure that relies on Lamport signatures. So there's a buddy of mine, he's also a physicist. He's one of the leading quantum physicists in Canada. His name's Pierre-Luc, and he developed something called Anchor Wallet. So anchorwallet.ca, it's the first implementation of Lamport signatures on Ethereum. So you'll need to take some action to protect yourself. Solana doesn't have big enough block sizes to fit Lamport signatures. They've got some proposals for different schemes, for example, this data shred thing, which is essentially combining, I don't know, different block sizes together to kind of increase the block size. But in other words, depending on the network, depending on its architecture and design decisions and trade-offs, et cetera, mitigation, let's say, will look very different for each network. In the case of Bitcoin, at a minimum, you'll need a soft fork, and really, you'll need a hard fork, and you'll need a bigger block size. I posted some stuff online on Twitter about this, so you can find it later, I guess. Okay, and what does it mean for Web3? Well, it means that there's a lot of VCs at this event, myself included. We have, everybody here, I would assume, has some stake in this ecosystem. Some of us may even have stakes that will take time to vest. Some of us are building things that will take years to develop. And if we have to make a sudden pivot, that's a very large economic cost potentially. My understanding is the Ethereum Foundation has already decided to scrap all the Verkle stuff, okay? That's probably 2-3 years of intense development with very smart, researchers and engineers, because they realize that, discrete logs can be factored, so this isn't gonna work anymore. And so as our ecosystem grows, the risk grows. And one of the things that I would say also we need to pay attention to is, I see a guy like Saylor, I love him, I think he's great, I admire what he's done, but he's putting Bitcoin on his balance sheet, and Michael Dell is talking about Bitcoin, and all these guys, Elon loves Doge and everything, and so the extent to which US corporations, including, of course, we've got BlackRock and all the big ETFs, continue to put Bitcoin on their balance sheet, potentially leverage against that, and now those balance sheets grow, presents potentially a multi-trillion-dollar target or incentive for an adversary to attack Bitcoin and cause a lot of damage. I don't know if, I have no idea what's going to happen in the future. I don't know if quantum risk is going to make the price drop or pump or whatever. I don't know. But I would infer that as soon as we start to lose trust in 256-bit elliptic curve cryptography, that the consequences will be significant because, well, you want to sleep well at night knowing that your private keys are safe. And if they're not, you may not feel comfortable keeping a lot of value in that type of a system. Okay, so this is just kind of a little bit of speculation, but yeah, I was saying all the different facilities, and you can take a look online. There's 5 to 10 companies targeting 2027 for 1 million qubits. That's kind of like a milestone number. I believe that 2027 could be a good target for when the risk may surface in a more material, tangible way. I think if we look at it objectively, for example, in the case of the United States, probably once all the manufacturing, all the startups that are manufacturing these devices are ready to go to market, I would imagine the NSA and the government will buy the first year's worth. And that's very prudent, actually. Probably they should. And then before it hits market and becomes available to customers. I have no idea what the regulation is going to look like. I would imagine, nonetheless, however it shapes out, that the power of this computing technology will be available. And Bitcoin and our entire ecosystem is out there in the open. Bitcoin is $1 trillion bounty if anyone can break it. So, I would also say 2030 is a good candidate too. I mean, it's just wild speculation. You come to your own conclusions. There's a convergence of technologies that also seem to be going in a certain direction, potentially accelerating, and they might come to a head, whether that's AI driving algorithmic improvements, AI driving high-tech industrial manufacturing, so more precise moving parts can be manufactured, et cetera. I'm not sure, but in any case, that would be my best guess, although this article today from the South China Morning Post kind of like freaked me out. I actually got the article like literally 10 minutes before I got on stage. Don't know if it's real or not. Probably very hard to verify. But nonetheless, do your own research, come to your own conclusions. Yeah, there's a great YouTube video as well. You definitely have to check it out. Okay, I hope I'm still okay with time, but just a quick little chart. You can kind of see all the different components that we need for this stuff to come to fruition, and a lot of it has already been realized. And we're definitely moving in a certain direction. So you can see the number of qubits going up unlocks a variety of different potential use cases. One of the things people like to say is that, well, quantum risk is so far in the future. And anyway, once we have a quantum computer and while we can do things like simulate nuclear fusion, the world is going to be much better and everything's going to be great. And I totally agree with that. But first of all, by the time we get to simulating nuclear fusion, as an example, elliptic curve cryptography will have been broken a long time before that. It's the lowest hanging fruit. One of the reasons why we have that cryptography for public-private key pair infrastructure is because it enables the most, let's say, user-friendly experience, which is what's enabled this ecosystem to grow, right? Like if it was too convoluted and way too difficult to manage, and maybe more secure, because the trade-off is always convenience and security, right? The more secure a system, the less convenient it is. For example, if you store your private keys on your phone in your Jax wallet, for those of you with theory emojis who remember the Jax wallet, I knew one guy who had 1 million Ether on his Jax wallet. I couldn't believe it. Of course, that's going to be very secure, very convenient, but not very secure. If you, I don't know, get one of those steel private key things and have your private key sharded in 3 different vaults across the world, including one in the middle of a Swiss mountain, that would require you to fly around and take a lot of action to access your keys. That would not be very convenient, but it would be very secure. That's always the trade-off. Okay, so migration. There's 2 ways to think about this stuff. One is defense and one is attack. Defense refers to how do we protect what already exists, okay? And attack refers to how do we build quantum money? How do we leverage this technology not to make what already exists, like, I don't know, somewhat faster or whatever, but rather how do we build an entirely new paradigm? So with respect to migration, this would fall under defense. Defense refers to what we can do to take steps to prevent our value from being stolen. Now, at the foundation level with a variety of these networks, like for example Ethereum, I know these guys are thinking about it very much, and maybe there's things that can be done in order to migrate or take steps to mitigate the damage. At the user level, there's things you can do, such as, like I said, my buddy Pierre-Luc's Anchor wallet, anchorwallet.ca. It's the first Lamport signature implementation. You can move your tokens into a wallet like that. In the case of Bitcoin, we have a whole host of things we would likely need to do as a community. So migration refers to one big, gigantic effort on the part of this entire community, irrespective of which blockchain you're using, in order to effectively protect what already exists to the best extent that you can. And then there's this kind of opportunity to build, all kinds of new stuff. And my buddy Stefano refers to that as quantum money. I'm going to post more stuff about that online in the coming weeks and months. I'm probably going to be yanked off stage in a second. But some key requirements: elliptic curve cryptography. If this stuff comes to fruition, it's probably in trouble, so we'll need different types of schemes. And yeah, if you want to find me, I'm available here and happy to talk about this stuff. And hopefully there isn't too much anxiety after this talk. Thank you.